In this Diablo 4 video, I'm going to be showing you my Blightlord build. This is a continuation of the Blightmaster build, and this is aimed at levels 50 plus, and for World Tier 3 of the game, doing Nightmare Dungeons and that sort of content. And it will be showcasing how to summon your minions and keep them alive, as well as deal a lot of damage over time using the Shadow element. In case you didn't realize from the last patch, minions were actually buffed, making them more viable, and people have been wondering, can you actually play a Minion Master or Summoner Necromancer? And I want to show you in this gameplay footage that you absolutely can. Now, I don't know if this will be viable all the way up to level 100, and obviously some adjustments will probably have to be made along the way. But here I am at level 55, 56 or so, playing with them. You can see they don't very much come close to dying at all, and I don't even heal them. So let me show you how I put this together. Let's separate this into two parts. First, how to keep your minions alive and use them, and second, how to get shadow damage. That's very, very good. So first of all, you're going to want Death's Defense and Bonded in Essence, and you're going to want to max these out. Now, Bonded in Essence makes it so that when you use the heal skill, which is basically when you have all of your minions out and you use the skeleton button or summon skeleton button, it will pull up a priest which will heal your minions. Usually this is about 10% of their health. With this fully maxed out, it becomes 70% of their health, keeping them alive very early on the game. Now, I'm not using it hardly at all at this point in the game, but there are points where you will need to heal them, and this can help keep them alive when you're playing through the game. Death's Defense makes it, when you have it maxed out, that they can't take more than 30% of their max health in a single hit. This means this is going to prevent them from getting one-shotted, two-shotted, even three-shotted. They're going to have to get hit a minimum of 4 times for them to die, which is absolutely fantastic, giving you time to heal them and keep them alive. Additionally, we have Skeletal Warrior Mastery and Skeletal Mage Mastery maxed out. This gives you increased health to these minions and increased damage. We're not really worried about the damage in this build. You do want to try and get damage out of them, but you want to make sure they stay alive. They can't deal any damage if they're dead, so getting the extra health from these is crucial. Additionally, you want to look for max minion life on your equipment. You can stack this up, giving your minions a lot more health, making them much, much harder to kill. So look for max minion life on your equipment as well. That'll help keep them alive. There are also a couple legendary aspects that work really well in tandem to help keep your minions alive, and the first one is the aspect of Hardened Bones. This makes it so that when you have over 7 minions out, your minions have a damage reduction up to 20%. That's a huge amount of flat damage reduction, and that's going to further keep them alive. So get and slot this one if you're having trouble keeping your minions alive. Now, the next one is the aspect of the Embalmer, and this makes it so that when you consume a corpse, you have a chance to drop a blood orb. Well, when you get this with the passive called Transfusion, that makes it so it heals your minions when you pick up blood orbs, where you're constantly detonating corpses with Corpse Explosion at a very, very rapid pace with this build, allowing these health orbs to pop up, and these will heal your minions. And since you're usually standing right on top of them or not very far away from them, you can just walk over them, and these will passively heal your minions. You don't have to use any ability. And this is what I'm really using to keep them alive. I'm healing them without having to do anything, so I can go about using all my other skill rotations, and I can throw the, actual skeletal summon skill out to heal them when they really need an extra heal. But most of the time this doesn't happen. These health orbs are passively healing them when you have this, and this is a great way to keep them alive. And we're also using the skill Decrepify here, which makes it so that the cursed enemies you mark do 20% less damage. So they're going to deal less damage to your minions, you're going to get damage reduction, you're going to be healing them passively through them. You have all the passives that boost their health and the bonuses that boost their health. And these things all work together to make it very hard to kill your minions. And you need to do some of this if you want to actually keep them alive. Now, there are a lot of other legendary aspects that can control. You can add more minions, you can add more skeletal warriors, you can add more skeletal mages, you can make it so they attack faster, you can make it so they do more damage. There are a lot of ones you can use, and the amount of them you want to slot really depends on how much damage you want to come from your minions and how much damage you want to come from you. The way I'm set up here, I have most of my damage coming from me and some damage coming from my minions, but the more of these you slot, you can kind of skew it however you want. And there's a lot of good legendary aspects for this setup, so there's a lot of different things you can do, and it also makes it really easy because when you pick up new legendary aspects, you can usually make use of a lot of them. So that's the minion aspect of the build. So now let's move along to how I actually get my damage. And the first thing you're going to know, which is probably something you noticed a little bit ago, is that I have no basic skill or core skill on my bar. I am getting all of my damage pretty much from Corpse Explosion and my minions. And you're wondering, how the heck is he doing this? And I want to explain exactly how this works. So I actually discovered how to make this work after the Grim Harvest nerf. If you didn't know, if you haven't logged in and played your Necromancer recently, Grim Harvest was nerfed from 9 essence for every corpse consumed down to 6 at max rank. And this is making it harder for me to, use my main skill, my core skill, and still, use Corpse Explosion to get my essence back up fast enough. So I kind of developed this method. So the key to this is really the synergy between two skills. And first one is the passive skill Hewed Flesh. This makes it so whenever you lucky hit while you're dealing damage, you're going to have a 12% chance to generate a corpse at the location. And the other part is the upgrade to Corpse Explosion, Blighted Corpse Explosion, which deals shadow damage over time. So essentially what's going to happen here is a corpse is going to appear on the ground either because of your minions or because you deal some damage. And then you're going to start using Corpse Explosion, and these damages are going to tick. And every time they tick and they lucky hit, you're going to have a chance to create another corpse. And once you start getting some of these generated, like 2 or 3 of these going at a time, corpses start generating, and you just basically create almost a limitless pile of corpses from this damage over time that keeps ticking. So that's really the strategy. So once that happens, once you build up enough corpses, you almost never run out of corpses, and it just kind of snowballs into more and more and more corpses, and you just cannot detonate them fast enough. And this is one of the reasons that I really like to use a wand for this build, because wand gives you lucky hit chance on it, which helps to increase the likelihood that you're going to get this to trigger, but also has a very, very fast attack speed, meaning that Corpse Explosion is going to fire off much, much faster, allowing you to stack up these damage over times very, very quickly. Beyond that, the build is pretty straightforward. Stack up passives that increase your damage, stack up the shadow passives to further increase your damage with shadow damage and make your minions deal more damage to enemies that are taking shadow damage. And that's really, the gist of the build. Now, everything else on top of that is the icing on the cake, but that's kind of the fundamentals of how this build works. So the key passive for this build, Shadow Blight, makes it so that you and your minions deal more damage to enemies that are caught in your shadow AoEs, and also every 10th time they take shadow damage, it sort of triggers an explosion of damage. And one of the legendary aspects that's really great for this is Aspect of the Decay, and that makes it so that each time that damage pops after 10 times, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger each successive time it pops. So you're going to get like some burst damage, and then more burst damage, and then more burst damage, and then more burst damage. So that's really good because we're just spamming shadow damage here. An Aspect of the Dam makes it so that you deal more shadow damage to enemies that are affected by both your Decrepify and your Iron Maiden, which is why we have Iron Maiden on here. This is a lot of damage, and Iron Maiden also makes it so that enemies take damage when they attack you, but it also generates essence, and it also heals you when enemies that are killed with it die, which is great, because this, you can throw this on enemies at the beginning of a fight, run into the middle, then they're going to hit you a bunch, and then you're going to heal right back up when you kill them. And another aspect that's exceptionally good is the Blighted aspect. This makes it so that after that Shadow Blight triggers, that, every 10 hits of shadow damage triggers, you're going to have increased damage for 6 seconds. This is up pretty much permanently once you start your shadow damage going. And you can get this to be a lot of damage if you put it on like a two-handed weapon and you get the top range of it. It can get up to like 180% damage, which is a staggering amount of damage. You might want to consider doing that depending on what your weapons are. If not, consider putting it on your amulet, because then you can still get a lot of that damage on there, and you can still keep that wand for the fast cast speed and also the lucky hit chance. And then we have Aspect of Ultimate Shadow, which makes it so that your Bone Storm actually does shadow damage over time. And because we're trying to trigger that, Shadow Blight effect, this is really, really strong for this build. It's going to help trigger this on all the enemies around you, which is going to deal a lot of damage in a hurry and also reduces the damage that you take. And we also use another legendary aspect of Shielding Storm, which makes it so that you gain a barrier every second this is up for a percentage of your max life. So this is what you want to trigger when there are a lot of enemies around. It's going to protect you, it's going to help trigger that Shadow Blight thing, and it's going to be really, really good for this build. And then lastly, we have the Fast Blood aspect here, and that makes it so that whenever we pick up a Blood Orb, we reduce the cooldown of our ultimate ability by 1 second. This is Bone Storm in this case. This is absolutely fantastic for this build because you're going to reduce the cooldown of this ability just by running into enemies and murdering them with Corpse Explosion over and over, and you're going to heal your minions at the same time, and then you're going to be able to trigger Bone Storm again, and then you're going to be able to keep repeating this, and it gives you a lot more uptime like on Trash Pulls, so you don't have to wait for the come off cooldown, because you really need this ability during tough fights. You can see like in the footage I'm fighting the Butcher and other enemies, and I'm actually very, very durable with this build. Even though my DPS isn't like off the Richter scale, I'm not dying, my minions are not dying, we're able to kill it. I got the Butcher in back-to-back dungeons with this, and we killed it both times, so I consider that a win. So for minions, we have the Reapers here because they have the option to make it so that they can create a corpse whenever they attack an enemy. This is good for boss fights, this is good all the time. We want those corpses for Corpse Explosion, so keep it on that. You can either use Shadow Mages or Frost Mages. Shadow Mages will help trigger Shadow Blight more often, but Frost Mages help CC enemies by freezing them. So this can be beneficial as well, and it's also very strong because it can eliminate like a strong elite for a minute or a couple seconds while it's frozen and prevent you from taking damage, which is also really good. Either one of these is fine. And they also have the Iron Golem here, and I have the one set up that makes it so that when he does his slam on the ground, it actually makes enemies vulnerable. And this is a really, really great ability to use with him. He'll run up, stun everything in an AoE, and then apply vulnerable, and then you can go to town. And this thing has like a 10-second cooldown. You want to use this all the time. Make him go stun elites. Make him go stun groups of enemies that are charging at you before you run in there so you don't get mauled. This is a really, really strong skill, so consider using this one. So that wraps up our Blightlord build. We kind of moved away from the Blight skill, but if you did want to put it in this build, you could replace Iron Maiden and use it there if you want to give you an Essence Spender. I messed around with this a bit. It works okay. I found that this works actually a little bit better in my opinion, but if you want to use Blight in there in place of Iron Maiden, you can, especially if you don't have the legendary aspect that increases your shadow damage if you have both Iron Maiden and Decrepify on enemies at the same time. Stay tuned, we have a lot more build guides planned on this channel. We're getting them done as quickly as we can, but we want to make sure they're good. And I even have a Reaper build coming soon that is a solo Necromancer that deals shadow damage with no minions. So if you're interested to play a solo Necromancer but not a blood-based one, stay tuned for that as well.